Strong winds sweeping across the North Dakota prairie carry the creak of old wood and the remaining memories of a time long gone. Here, across the seemingly endless Great Plains, the wide horizon often hides historical wounds in the form of towns that died before their time. The ambition of pioneers and the glory of railroad lines that once burned brightly have now gone cold, leaving fading building skeletons beneath the open sky. Every ruin tells a story of promised prosperity that eventually lost to harsh nature and the shifting wheels of the world economy. This journey is not just about crossing geographic coordinates, but tracing the remains of civilizations slowly worn away until only chilling silence is left behind. First, have you ever heard of Tagus? The landscape in Mount Rail County suddenly feels heavy when the silhouette of an old wooden church appears on the horizon. This town represents the nightmare of every pioneer settlement that once thrived in the early 20th century because of the Great Northern Railway. The disaster began when a major fire consumed its business district, followed by a mass exodus of residents. Urban legends about a passage into darkness beneath its ruins may be only folklore, but the silence covering this area feels very real and suffocating. The remaining buildings now stand tilted with blackened wood, as if surrendering to the weight of history they carry alone in the middle of the vast prairie, with no signs of life left around them. Leaving the mystical aura of Tagus behind, our journey continues to a place where time seems to have truly stopped ticking in the silence of the fields. Arena welcomes anyone who arrives with a view that feels like a melancholic painting of economic failure in rural America. Located in Burleigh County, this town once pulsed with life as a vital grain shipping center for the survival of nearby farmers. Its most striking icon is a church with a single tower that still stands upright, though its interior is now home only to dust and wild birds. When the railroad stopped operating, Arena lost its functional reason to remain on the map. Weathered wooden houses still stand even though their doors have long fallen away, as if waiting for their owners to return from a past that can never happen again. If Arena was abandoned because of economics, this next location was abandoned because military technology became outdated. In a remote corner of Divide County, the massive concrete structures of Fortuna Air Force Station stand in sharp contrast to the flat and silent landscape around them. This former Cold War radar base was once a self-contained military community that housed hundreds of personnel guarding America's skies from northern air attack threats. The facility once had housing, a theater, and a fitness center before satellite technology made this ground radar site irrelevant. After it was deactivated in 1979, the base became a cold concrete shell with dangling cables and dark, unsettling corridors. It is physical proof of how quickly a strategic defense site can turn into a meaningless pile of ruins. From the remains of military tension near the border, we move to a town destroyed by the intrigue of local political power. This is Sherbrooke, a town that shows how a place can die simply by losing its administrative status and transportation connections. Located in Steele County, this settlement once thrived as the county seat and held major influence in the area. But harsh local politics and the railroad company's decision to shift its route to the neighboring town of Hope left Sherbrooke economically isolated. Once the government offices were forcibly moved, residents migrated in large numbers to search for opportunities elsewhere. Today, almost no original buildings remain except foundations buried beneath tall grass and a small monument marking that political power once centered on this silent land. Losing political status may be painful, but losing a role in the transportation industry was far more deadly for a riverside town like Verendrye. Located in the green Cerise River Valley of McHenry County, Verendrye offers a much more dramatic and artistic ghost town scene. St. Fiacre Catholic Church, standing on a hill, looks like a loyal guardian staring down at the ruins of the town below, now turned into farmland. The town lost its purpose when modern train engine technology developed, making regular water stops along this route unnecessary. Verendrye slowly faded as its post office and school closed, leaving behind grand structures now blending into the wild, natural landscape. The silence here is broken only by the flow of the river and the wind moving through the tree branches. This shift in transportation technology also brought similar destruction to a small settlement in McKenzie County. Charbonneau tells the painful story of human struggle against the economic depression and severe drought of the 1930s, which shattered farmers' dreams in the West. The brick schoolhouse, still standing firmly in the wheat fields, is the only remaining monument to a community that once carried great hope. Inside the empty classroom, dust gathers on wooden floors that were once filled with the joy of school children learning about the future. Sadly, that future never favored Charbonneau because sustainable economic access never arrived. The town is now a symbol of human helplessness when nature and changing times seem to conspire to end the existence of a small settlement. Next, the story of the silent school in Charbonneau strongly echoes the deep loneliness surrounding this area. Griffin may never have had a brick building as grand as other towns, but its role as a livestock loading station in Bowman County once gave life to the local ranching economy. As larger and more efficient freight trucks appeared, the small railroad line in Griffin lost its purpose, and the town began to shrink until it disappeared from public memory. Today, the remaining structures are only tilted wooden shacks, nearly flattened by decades of extreme weather. Griffin represents many small points across North Dakota that slowly evaporated without ever receiving much attention, a silent witness to a pioneer era that has now ended. The loss of transportation function in Griffin is also the main reason why a wooden skyscraper in Temple now stands alone. The towering grain elevator in Temple is the only visual sign left that this part of Williams County was once a very busy farming hub. Like many other ghost towns across the Great Plains, Temple failed to keep its population when modern farming efficiency began replacing the need for human labor. The town gives the impression of a place abandoned in a hurry. Some old farm equipment still lies rusting around the main building, which has started to lean. Temple is now only a silent point along the main railroad line, a reminder of an era when every small station was the center of the world and a source of hope for nearby farming families. Meanwhile, far out in the rough Badlands of Golden Valley County, Trotters stands as proof of both the resilience and fragility of ranchers who tried to conquer the hardest terrain. This town was once a vital social center for people living many kilometers away from the nearest civilization in the wild western region. But geographic isolation and extreme weather eventually became the main causes of the town's death, because basic services like healthcare and education could no longer survive independently. The general store building, still standing with empty shelves, gives a picture of a hard life full of struggle. Trotters is now completely silent, a settlement that seems to have been swallowed back by the landscape of cliffs and ravines. The isolation of the western region stands in sharp contrast to the industrial bustle that once filled these streets. Balfour, in McHenry County, once had a very bright future as a rival to the larger towns around it, before a series of major fires destroyed its main infrastructure. Although it technically still has a few residents holding on, its downtown now shows rows of empty commercial buildings covered with wooden boards, creating a strong ghost town atmosphere. Every street corner in Balfour seems to radiate a sense of loss for the industrial and commercial glory it once had in the early 20th century. The town is now in a sad transition, trapped between the decaying remains of its former greatness and an increasingly uncertain future as economic opportunities continue to shrink. Hamburg in Wells County is a perfect example of a settlement that feels frozen inside a photograph from a long-gone decade. The intact wooden grain elevator dominates the town's view, surrounded by houses that sometimes still contain traces of their original furniture. Hamburg's sharp population decline happens slowly but steadily as younger generations move to larger cities in search of a more modern life. Walking through Hamburg creates a deep emotional experience of how a strong religious community can gradually fade away until only a grand silence remains beneath the shadow of aging wooden structures. Next, from towns that have truly become ghosts, we move to a settlement that is still inhabited but starting to show similar signs. Rutland represents the fighting spirit of small communities in North Dakota that refuse to surrender to population numbers that keep falling every year. Although its population has already reached a worrying level, Rutland still tries to preserve its identity through local events and determined efforts to keep the remaining small shops alive. Still, signs of decay are clearly visible in the roadside buildings, many of which have not been renovated for years because of limited budgets. Rutland is a reminder that the line between a living town and a ghost town is often defined only by the spirit of a handful of people who decide to stay and protect their ancestral legacy. Rutland's struggle to stay relevant in a changing world is also felt with the same weight by the people of Havana, though the challenges are growing heavier. Located in Sargent County, Havana is facing the harsh reality of farmland consolidation, which continues to reduce the number of families in the area. Streets that were once filled with children's laughter now feel much quieter, while shops that used to serve as economic centers now leave behind only dusty, empty storefronts. Havana shows clear early signs of a ghost town. The loss of important services like repair shops and daily necessity stores, making residents feel increasingly isolated on their own land. The slow decline creeping through Havana is also beginning to knock on the door of a historically larger town like Lidgerwood. As a town that once had strong trade infrastructure and public facilities, Lidgerwood now faces a downtown that is slowly emptying itself out. The grand brick buildings along its main street are now often unoccupied, creating a strange silence in an area that should be the busy center of Richland County. Although it cannot yet be fully categorized as a ghost town, the decline in economic activity and the closure of local businesses in Lidgerwood send a real warning signal. No town is truly immune to the demographic shifts and large-scale urbanization now sweeping across the Great Plains, forcing this town to keep adapting in order to survive. As the final point of this journey, we look at Hankinson, a town with great potential now standing at a crossroads. Hankinson itself offers a view of how vulnerable regional towns in North Dakota can be, even those that were once highly prosperous. Known as a railroad transportation center and a gateway to lake tourism, Hankinson now has to fight hard to keep its population and businesses from falling further. Like the phenomenon seen in Pine Bluff, Hankinson is a warning that beautiful historic buildings are not enough to save a community if its economic foundation is no longer relevant to global market needs. The town stands as a symbol of a settlement racing against time, trying to keep its name from becoming the next entry on the long list of ghost towns scattered across North Dakota's landscape. This line of towns in North Dakota proves that the existence of a settlement is fragile and deeply dependent on the momentum of its era. From Tagus, destroyed by fire, to Hankinson, still struggling to continue, each place teaches a lesson about how a community breathes, grows, and sometimes has to surrender to silence. These ghost towns are not just collections of decaying wood and concrete, but silent witnesses to a world that never stops changing. In the end, everything we build today may one day become only a footnote in history, buried beneath the vast prairie and the eternal silence of the horizon.